Everybody, it's Holly here today for Newton's Nook, and today I'm going to be creating this card using the Serene Silhouette stamp set and its coordinating dies. I'm also going to be using the Mama Elephant All Prettied Up die set, the Newton Nook's Land Borders die, and some Tim Holtz Distress Ink cardstock in the wood grain and then the plain regular Distress cardstock. So I'm going to start out by using the All Prettied Up die, and I'm going to use the circle center there to get a template on my cardstock. So I'm just going to lay it on there and use a pencil to make some light marks to where the opening would be on the front of my card, or the window would be. And you won't see the pencil marks because I'm making them on the outside of the circle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to go ahead and get the Distress, and we're going to be using Distress Oxide inks. So I'm going to be using a couple colors, Fossilized Amber, Worn Lipstick, Wilted Violet, and Broken China to create kind of a sunset background. So I just squish the ink pad onto the mat, and then I use my mister to mist the water. Then I'm taking a plastic sheet, and then I'm picking up the color and smushing it onto my background. Now I'm going to heat set each color after I lay it down, and then go back in and add a second layer of the color. With the plastic sheet, it gives you a little bit more control as to where you want the color to go. So I want to keep it within the circle, so that's why I'm doing it that way. And then you want to make sure you clean up your mat and your plastic sheet in between each color. I'm using a paper towel, but you could also just use a baby wipe because you don't want the colors to mix on that plastic sheet, and you could have some residue behind on your craft mat as well. So I'm just going to keep going on and adding each layer of the Distress Oxide ink, and then I'm going to heat set each one in between. Once I have all of my inks down where I want them, I'm going to make sure I dry it one more time, and then I'm going to use the Ranger Mister bottle here, and I'm going to flick some water drops onto the background, and then I'm going to use a paper towel to pick up the water, and that's going to leave those distress spots behind that we're familiar with distress inks. And then I'm going to go ahead and dry that again with my heat tool. I want to make sure everything's nice and dry because we will be embossing on this panel. So once I've heat set again, I'm going to go ahead and set that aside, and then we're going to work on the other part of the card. So I'm going to start with a A2 standard size top folding card base. I'm going to go ahead and score that. And then I went ahead and die cut all my panels already. So I've cut a piece of black fun foam and that piece of the Tim Holtz wood grain distress cardstock with that rectangle shape from the All Prettied Up, and then I'm just trimming off the scalloped edge, and that's going to give me the perfect size piece to fit the back of that panel. And then I went ahead and stamped the images from the Serene Silhouette in VersaFine black ink, and then I also used the Land Borders die, the curvy part, to create a snowbank. I did this earlier because I wanted that Versamark ink to dry a little bit, or VersaFine ink to dry a little bit, because it is pigment based. So I went ahead and cut them out with the coordinating dies, and then I'm going to go ahead and lay down the little snowbank that I created with the Land Borders die and a piece of Nina Solar White cardstock. Now, there is probably an easier way to do this. I have no idea why I made this so difficult for myself by the way I did it, but I actually would have adhered the snowbank to the front of the panel with the window in it from behind, not directly on the piece with the distress ink. So don't do as I do unless you want to make things complicated. So then I'm going to trim up where I need to cut the cardstock panel behind the distressing panel. And I'm going to go ahead and use my paper trimmer to trim that up. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the adhesive to the back of the window panel. Making sure to leave a space around the window opening so that we can put the trees in there. And I also left an opening along that snowbank I created right along the edge of the top so we can tuck stuff down in between there. So I'm going to go ahead and use my anti-static powder bag and go over the back of the distress panel. And I also would have done this before I put the snowbank on so that I didn't have to use my heat tool against that. So I'm going to stamp the little snow flurries from the Serene Silhouette stamp set with the Versamark ink. And then I'm going to use some Wow Twinkle Puff embossing powder, which creates puff, but it also has some sparkle in it. And I'm going to go ahead and heat set that. I do all of my heat setting off camera to the side there. And then I'm just have a Swiffer, keep a Swiffer thing on your desk, and it's good for picking up glitter and embossing powder. So then I'm going to go ahead and adhere that front panel with the window opening to the distress panel. And you can see there where I mentioned you want to leave a little bit of space around the opening. And then I'm going to go ahead and measure where my little images are going to go, and I'm just going to trim them off. And then I'm going to put some adhesive on them and tuck them down behind the window panel. Again, I think it would have been easier to adhere the tape to the front of them and adhere them to the back of the window before I put everything down. For some reason, this worked easier for me at this moment. So I'm just adding the images in. The double tree goes behind the snowbank. And I'm just using some adhesive runner there. You don't need anything special. You could use some liquid glue if you wanted to. I didn't trim off the panel all the way enough there, so I just trimmed it off a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add the buck to the back with the adhesive right behind the snowbank. And then I'm going to go ahead and add that piece of fun foam to the back of the card. And I'm just using some it's super sticky adhesive tape. Once I have that on there, I'm going to go ahead and mount that onto the card base. And then once that's mounted, I'm going to add the female deer with some foamed tape to give it a little bit of dimension. The fun foam has a little bit of a lower dimension than the foam tape does. So I like to combine the two on the projects to give you varying heights. And it also keeps things from being too bulky by having so much of that foam tape on it, the 3M foam tape. So then I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiment onto a scrap of the black cardstock there. Just using my anti-static powder, and I'm using the Versamark ink. And then I'm going to heat set that in some white embossing powder. And then I'm going to use the Garden Die Starter die set. This die set is actually retired from Newton Nooks, but I'm going to use the banner that's in it to die cut the sentiment. And then I'm just going to adhere it to the front of the card with some foam tape, and that pretty much finishes up my card today. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you back again next time. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.